And hello, everybody. You're very welcome to a new episode of On Location with Sean and Marco. I'm Sean, and flying solo today. Marco's actually on his way to Europe, getting a head start on our coverage, actually on European soil for our InfoSecurity Europe in London coverage. And we're excited to be in London, excited to have the conversations and to hear what's going on in Europe and around the world from our friends at InfoSecurity Europe. I'm thrilled to have Madelein and Topé on from Forrester. We're going to have a chat about predictions and futures, and of course, I think we might even touch on that two-letter acronym that everybody seems to be talking about. We can't not talk about that. So, thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you very much.
Great to be here.
Very good. And I have analyst envy. I'll start off with that. I always thought I'd be an analyst, so I cherish the work that you do, and so who knows, maybe someday I'll have the opportunity to do some fun stuff. And I also love talking with the Forrester team. You all have some great insights, and any chance I get to speak with the Forrester analysts, I'm thrilled for that as well. Before we kick into what's going on at InfoSecurity Europe, more specifically, maybe a few words from each of you about what you're up to and what your role is at Forrester, so folks know who we're hearing from. And we'll start with you, Madelein.
Yeah, so my name is Madelein van der Hout. I'm a senior analyst at Forrester within the cybersecurity and risk team. And specifically, I cover a couple of domains. So from a global perspective, I'm looking at API security. And from a European perspective, cyber security consulting services, threat landscape, together with Topé, cybersecurity trends, and how CISOs are actually spending their budget, and if we can find any trends in that as well. And one of the other interesting things that I'm working on is actually security operating model.
That's intriguing. one of the themes that runs through all of my podcasts is operationalizing cybersecurity.
Yes, and it's actually something that will always be evolving. So it's a very interesting coverage area, I would say.
Well, hopefully we can touch on that quickly, and who knows, maybe we'll have a deeper conversation on that topic, because I'm super intrigued by it, and I think there's a lot of opportunity to do some things there. Topé.
Thank you very much. Topé Olufon, also a senior analyst based out of Germany. At Forrester, I cover zero trust, managed detection and response, digital identity, and eSignature. So while I primarily cover the European market, I also collaborate frequently with global colleagues, especially in the digital trust domains.
Perfect. Well, thank you both for that, and let's get into it. So, InfoSecurity London is 4th through 6th in June, just around the corner, and you both have conversation. I think you're joining together on one, and then Topé, you're on another panel looking at AI. Let's start with the general view of what you think will be the main themes at this year's conference. And so I'm curious to know. So you mentioned before we started recording the some predictions you made, and you're going to be looking back at that. That might be a good place to start. So maybe if you can share some of those points, Madelein, that would be great.
Of course. Well, what we are expecting to see, because it is something that we see everywhere around the world, obviously, is that InfoSecurity will also revolve quite a lot around generative AI. But I'm actually hoping that we will travel beyond just generative AI and what kind of sophisticated threats we see emerging from that. Because when we have a look at the most notable breaches that occurred in 2023, a lot still stem from poor hygiene. So I think we also need to remind everyone that we still have to work on the basics. So one of our predictions, Forrester predictions, is that 90% of all data breaches will include a human element still. And that really calls for companies to look well, at their workforce, at their employees, how can they really change behavior instead of just working on behavior or awareness? One of the things that I have a lot of conversations around is if you have training systems where you just have to look through a video, you see that people will do that while multitasking, and that doesn't really change anything. It doesn't change behavior, and that will mean that in the future, the human element within breaches will still be very huge. And it's actually something we can really change. One of our other predictions actually is that at least 3 data breaches this year will be publicly blamed on AI-generated code. And we're saying at least 3 because when we're looking at root causes, we are suspecting that if it's due to AI-generated code, not every company will report that.
Interesting. Meaning, and I don't know if you have any insight into why they won't report it. Is that they don't want people to know that it was they were using generated code, or?
Yes, unfortunately, we're still working with quite a lot of blaming and shaming when it comes to reporting incidents. So a lot of companies still are afraid, that there will be repercussions or that there will be actions against that, and especially with AI and not having your security elements in place. That could lead to a huge reputational damage.
And Topé, what are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts actually mirror Madeleine's. So I think a lot of it is also going to stem from the fact that organizations will try to use AI to generate a lot of code. And beyond just generating code, a lot of the security practices that we've learned the hard way are going to be unlearned, because they're using AI to generate code. They're also trying to use AI to validate code. That's going to result in a significant number of low-hanging vulnerabilities. And I say low-hanging because if you think about a few years ago where SQL injections were a dime a dozen, because a lot of focus was shifted to rolling out code pretty quickly. Right now, we expect to see similar things with AI because people are going to have a similar approach. It's an exciting tool. It's good for productivity, and they will try to automate parts of security that are not yet ready to be automated.
Yeah, and I can't help but go back to the hygiene and the human element. If all of our training is for end users to not click on stuff, and we're not worrying about don't create code with that, we're leaving a big empty gap right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really interesting to see those type of things as well, because even when we look at the increase of, for instance, software for recruitment, AI is dominating in that field as well, but no one is particularly checking if the people that are applying are real or if the vacancies are actually real. So there could also exist fuzz in the future if we're hiring real people. So there's a lot of elements you can also manipulate in that.
Yeah, I've actually heard stories of, I presume, who knows really, but I presume that in many of the cases that were being referred to, the people were real, but not the people you think they are. So somebody would be doing the interviews. They'd be using, well, somebody who does great at interviews would do the interviews for somebody, and then they get hired and not be the same person that got the job, but they're actually the one doing the job. It's quite interesting.
Exactly. And if we're taking it even further, there's already a woman who trained a large language model based on all the data of her ex-boyfriends and placed that in a hologram and already married the hologram. So there are all kinds of interesting but also disturbing developments when it comes to generative AI.
The human mind has no limits, I think, in that regard. To get weird. I want to go back to the hygiene piece and maybe touch a bit on the risk areas that you focus on, Madelein, as well. Of course, I want your thoughts on this as well, Topé. But one of the things that I've been hearing is this concept of resilience, and more of a broader resilience, not just cyber. And I'm curious your perspective on how organizations are looking at the general hygiene, kind of best practices, follow these frameworks, adhere to these regulations, and actually then also apply our own business ethics and morals and goals and things like that to the policies, to really look at it where we need to be resilient, how we need to be resilient, how we look at risk, how we measure it, how we mitigate it. So any thoughts on that, some things you're hearing in that regard?
So I evaluate resilience policies, frameworks as in a very boring way. They're basically tools, a means to get to an end. And I like to look at the trades when we're thinking of security and safety. So you speak to an electrician, a plumber, or a construction guy. A lot of their safety instructions are there because they know something bad is going to happen. They treat risk as just a part of doing the job. They don't need to have extensive discussions on risk because the outcomes of not following these procedures are pretty binary. And I think we stand to learn a lot from that in cybersecurity. We say cybersecurity is meant to enable the business, and this is typically used as, providing some sort of leeway to cut corners. But if we cannot articulate why the corners should be cut, on the flip side, why a security rule exists, is it because of legacy reasons? Is it because it's just the best practice? On both sides of the coin, it kind of hampers your business case, because you're not going to see a construction worker arguing about the validity of a helmet. It's pretty binary. It's pretty straightforward. You're going to crack your skull if you don't wear one. And I think we need to be able to create such very binary outcomes when approaching risk and security. It's also going to really help our resilience. Because again, a lot of safety precautions in the trades are taking with the assumption a system will fail. And that's the whole point of resilience in cybersecurity. There is a tendency for organizations to focus so much on prevention, which is, of course, great. You should try to prevent bad things from happening. The aspect of when something bad happens, how do our systems deal with it? Again, back to the example of a helmet. This helmet has been tested for impact. A lot of organizations have not really tested their resilience or response plans, and I think there's a significant gap there.
To add to that, there's also something different going on, especially within Europe with NIS2 and DORA. So we see this legislation, these regulations coming up, and all for the sole purpose to have a more resilient society, that the impact of a breach that occurs in our society has a minimal impact. Because if there's a bank who experiences a breach, that can have a huge impact on anyone. We cannot pay our mortgage, we cannot pay our groceries. So, huge impact. But what I also hear from companies is that there's so much unclarity on what it means to comply. So a lot of companies are looking at the legislation, trying to find a bare minimal standard just to have that compliance thinged. And I think that's actually a disturbing development, because it should not be about complying to legislation. It should be about how can I protect my business to a minimum standard at least, so we have that hygiene in place, and that we can move forward on cybersecurity as a society.
I love what you both are saying, and my mind's going a mile a minute here. I want to, just the whole cost of adhering to regulations, right? This whole thing. I want to take the analogy, Topé, of the helmet, because I think there's something interesting there to dig deeper into. A helmet, I don't know. We don't wear helmets in a bus, right? But then the bus has safety measures that they test, right? And we don't rely on just the bus safety measures when we build the roads. The roads have been designed with angles and not too tight of turns and things like that to ensure that vehicles can travel on them safely. If we have potholes, we fix them, and we put lights to help cross traffic and things like that. So how do we, in the broader ecosystem of business operations, where technology is coming into play, workflows are moving data around and connecting businesses and people together, how do we get to that test? And I'm hoping you'll tie it somehow to zero trust, because I think there's probably some hook into that. How do we get the helmet and the safety tests throughout the business?
So if I'm trying to tie to zero trust, it's going to be a bit of a reach, quite frankly, because while yes, they're both risk control mechanisms, they're functionally different risk control mechanisms. Okay. However, the principle right there. So think of, again, any other non-digital system. For example, cars. Cars are designed with the assumption that there might be a crash. As such, there are things like crumple zones, right? There are also seat belts in place. All of this is built with the explicit objective of ensuring the passenger and driver survive, right? That's the whole point of the safety mechanisms. Now, when organizations should look at the business, at whatever they're trying to secure, I think it's very important to ask that very basic question, and which is why I say cybersecurity should be boring. What are we trying to secure? If zero trust is the way to secure it, then you adopt zero trust. Now, when we think of zero trust, least privilege, consistent monitoring, and untrusted by default, right? Those three principles are important, but a lot of organizations don't really understand why. So zero trust becomes another compliance project that they will inevitably fail at. Now, if you're doing zero trust for an environment, now let's think of something. You're a fintech, right? And you have a lot of developers. What you're trying to use zero trust there, first and foremost, should be your development pipeline. Because if you use zero trust everywhere else, but your development pipeline is not secure, why are we really doing zero trust, seeing as you're a fintech and development is a huge part of what you do? And that's why I like to approach security from a non-digital perspective, because safety systems in the physical world are designed with specific objectives in mind and not just compliance reasons.
And Madelein, you mentioned the human element earlier, and I'm connecting this to what Topé is talking about. I'm thinking about somebody working in the field, an oil field, let's say. The risk or the impact is binary, right? If I don't work this valve properly, it's going to blow up in my face and it's going to hurt. I don't know. We have that same sense of, I don't know if we call it fear or reality or understanding of the impact of our digital systems. And Marco and I talk about it quite often, where because you can't see it, it's often magic and it just works, and therefore you don't really understand the impact it has behind the scenes or broader. So what are your thoughts on this? Well,
also when we look at the human element in cybersecurity, so if you have your entire company, your human element is as strong as your least experienced employee. And then we're not even talking about different generations and how different generations are looking at personal data, for instance. So my perception of personal data is different than, for instance, for my little niece. She would accept cookies right away. She doesn't perceive some information as personal information where I would say it's personal information. So I think that's a struggle that companies should address as well. So what do we mean by sensitive data? Have behavior training instead of just videos, because social engineering attacks are also focusing nowadays not only on the CTO, but also his strategic advisor, his assistant, because those people also see the same information, but are usually more accessible.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And I don't know, in your views of operating models, I think when I think of it, I'm thinking specifically security programs. But do you bring that view broader to operating security within the business as well?
Yeah. So one of the things we advise is for CISOs to align their security strategies and their security goals to their company goals. So the context of your company and the environment your company is working in, is one of the most important parameters. Because based on that and based on your company goals and aligning your security to those goals, you create more importance to your security strategy as well. We see a tremendous uplift in CISOs who are directly reporting to the board. So we also see that we've managed security up to the board, which is really great. It means that there are more budgets, and that the awareness part of it all is progressing. So you also see that companies are looking at what are the type of things we want to have in-house, what can we outsource, and how do we how can we work together with all the other departments so we can do it in a secure way. So that actually is a great trend that is developing.
And do you feel that's a trend globally, or do you see the European business having a little more maturity in that area?
Well, actually, if we're comparing numbers, America is ahead compared to Europe. So within Europe, less CISOs are reporting into the board than if you compare it with companies in America. I do believe that it is going to change because within the NIS2 legislation, they are driving boardroom accountability, and there are huge fines. And they can even make a C-level resume or step out of his or her job if they didn't have their security posture in order. So I think that is going to create also a different importance of security when NIS2 is implemented in all European countries.
Right. We'll have to follow that closely.
Definitely.
Yeah. You both cover so much, and I mean we're barely scratching the surface on the topics. We're kind of touching on little things here and there, and I really appreciate that. I want to in the few minutes we have left, because this is part of our on location. The goal is to get people to come and chat with you in London during InfoSecurity London, and you both have panels. So Madelein, I'm going to give you the mic to talk about the panel you're on with Topé and your colleague Paul McKay. That's on it's Wednesday the 5th at 10 a.m. local time there in London. The title is Navigating Europe's Evolving Threat Ecosystem 2024 and Beyond. What can people expect to hear from the three of you then?
Well, everyone should come to this panel, first of all.
Of course.
Because we're together with Paul McKay. Paul McKay now is a research director at Forrester, but he used to be an analyst as well, covering all types of areas within cybersecurity. Also very knowledgeable. He has worked on multiple reports on predictions. So he will have also very valuable insights in how we look at predictions and how we determine if they are actually coming true. But together with Topé, Paul, and myself, we're going over what we see in the market. We're going to debate how trends are evolving, and we're going to have a closer look at the predictions we make. And we're there as well to answer any question anyone has. So it's more of an invitation to come and join and to have a lively discussion with us.
Discussions are good. Conversations make things happen. Yep. Perfect. And Topé, your session is wading through AI overload. There we go. We're all in on AI in this one. Where are we going? What are we doing? You and Stephanie Atimi and Henry Azure, you're going to have a great conversation on this, looking at a number of things. Tell us a little bit about what you're talking about there.
Thank you. So the summary version is we're going to be cutting through the fluff. AI has been a buzzword. Well, not a buzzword anymore. There are practical applications these days, but there's been a lot of noise about what it can be used for. And of course, there are a lot of false promises, a lot of theatricality and deception from vendors. So what this session is going to do is help you cut through that noise, talk about practical deployments of AI and how you can start getting value from it today. Whatever potential business initiatives you could drive with it. And we're also going to look at some successful case studies. So a lot of this is bringing it down to earth, filtering the noise and focusing on how you can get tangible benefits from AI, because we run the risk of AI just being this thing that people slap on pretty much everything else. Think of how companies randomly added .com to their names, even though they had nothing to do with the internet. We've gotten to that point with AI. So we need to figure out how we get actual benefits. And that's what this session is going to help you do.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see how many. I was just in San Francisco, and the plus AI on the names of companies and products was it was overwhelming. I'll just say that. And you had me at case studies. Anytime I can get a use case and hear about how somebody did something, I'm always very interested in that. So I'm excited to hear what some of those use cases and case studies are of successful adoption. And I want to thank you both. This is supposed to be just a quick chat and to meet and introduce you to our audience and invite everybody to join us at InfoSecurity London and certainly attend these two sessions, these two panels. They intrigued Marco and I, hence the outreach to Topé and Madelein to have them on the show. So thank you both for spending a few moments with me today. Wish you a safe journey to London, and excited to meet you in person and to enjoy the conversation, be part of the conversation, take action from the conversation. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks everybody for listening to this episode. We will see you on location in London very soon. Until then, keep well, everybody.